who are the poorest leaders who are least prepared? Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. Let's not deal with Boris Johnson because he's more of a buffoon than a crook. Let's deal with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as the New York Times has shown, as all the evidence shows, really, Obama in 2014, 15, 16, Obama prepared for pandemics, created a White House pandemic unit, funded things, made public speeches warning about it. And of course, as soon as Trump came to the White House, he fired the scientists, closed down everything. Yeah. And of course, in this world where 90% of people don't really know how to distinguish between fake news and truth, Trump is able to go on television every day and say, Obama left me unprepared. He didn't make enough masks, and he didn't have enough ventilators ready for this, and he didn't have enough testing kits.
Yep.
And he doesn't explain to the American people that you couldn't create testing kits for COVID before COVID existed. But people believe that. So we're in a post-truth reality, and that's a bad thing. So who gets the prize for the worst leadership? I think everybody knows the answer.
And I think today you sent out a tweet, Alan, describing him in Italian, and bear with me for the translation, as incredibly incompetent as a president can get.
I said monstrously.
Monstrously, even monstrously, mostruosamente Italian, and that as a reaction that he cut the WHO funding. Now, what does it do in terms of anybody watching the political scene, and also, let's say, the poll numbers towards Donald Trump and the elections? I wonder whether this kind of move, where everybody, from whoever is in Midland America to the most sophisticated, busier, business-driven sides of America, is it going to shift a little bit the image and his ratings when he pulls the financial plug on the WHO?
You know, Patricia, it's hard to say. The official poll numbers would suggest that Joe Biden is 10% higher than Trump across the board. But the same poll numbers show that, I would put aside the polls. I got it wrong in 2016. I said Brexit won't happen. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I got it wrong in November 2016. I said the polls have a 3 or 4% margin in favor of Hillary. I can't believe that Trump will be elected. That was wishful thinking. I got it wrong. You have to admit when you're wrong in life. Today, I'm too traumatized by my past mistakes about polling to say that what I would have said then as a New York Times reader or a member of the intelligentsia. I can't say today, logically speaking, with the performance and the blood on his hands and the stupidity and incompetence he's showing, that would suggest, logically, Patricia, that Trump is going to lose. Because logic may not be relevant in a post-truth world where Russian disinformation and fake news is all over the place. So, who could have ever predicted that Trump would still retain 45 or 50% of the American political support?
Yeah.
That in the middle of a COVID pandemic, Trump supporters are photographed and shown on video on television, running down the highways in Alabama, shouting, "I won't get the virus because I have the blood of Jesus on my skin." So we're in a different world. And would I like Trump to be defeated? Of course. Do I think that Biden will win? Logically speaking, he should. Do I think that's a given? No.
So what would the American voter in a few months' time be judging Trump by?
This is the point. That's a good question. What really could happen, I don't want to sound like Cassandra, but since I believe that there will be another $1 or $2 trillion of money coming on top of the first 2 trillion, 2.5 trillion, I believe that one of the intelligent things that Trump could do to help him win re-election is not what he's doing now, which is a complete mismanagement of the crisis and opening up America too soon and risking a second peak. But he could time tax cuts and another $1 trillion. And remember, on the current stimulus, he's delayed Americans getting their emergency money for a few weeks because he had the US Treasury insist that he had to have his name on the checks that go to American citizens.
Wow.
Sounds funny, but it's not funny. But I think he can time another trillion around September, October, just before the election. Take any anecdotal or statistical evidence of a seeming recovery and try to use that and probably convince enough stupid and ignorant Americans to vote for him and potentially get back to a 50-50 position with Biden through that manipulation in the autumn.
I think this is a really interesting point you're making, because a lot of analysts, after Trump was elected the first time around, they actually said it was because he was judged on the economy. Now, you know, the economy is always something inherited, like Angela Merkel inherited the recovery process from Gerhard Schröder in Germany. Same sort of spiel you could argue, of course, for the American case. And every time I see the markets rallying up in a world that we are talking about, the greatest depression since, or the greatest recession since the last depression, I'm just going, what is going on? But of course, if this is what Americans literally will feel in their pockets, they may use that to judge him. So I think what you're saying in terms of his strategy to pump money into the economy, creating a totally different problem.
That economic boost in the autumn, creating a new problem for the future, which Trump doesn't worry about, plus Trump's ability to lie, steal, cheat, use Putin's disinformation campaign, collaborate again, collude with the Russians again, and all the many things that Donald Trump is known for.
I think when it comes to, you know, the inside story kind of what went on in the family, and here, Mary Trump really goes into the deep of what happened between her father, Donald Trump's uncle, and of course between Donald Trump and his parents. And it seems that Donald Trump was somewhat a neglected child. Fred Trump, his father, was very much focused on his brother, Fred, who then died, first of all, in order to take over the business, after which, when he passed away, I think due to alcoholism, he then focused on Donald, but only to serve his own purpose, i.e. that the Trump empire should grow and be led by somebody like Donald Trump. Donald wanted to live up to this, of course, from a very young age. And on the other hand, his mother fell sick, seriously sick, when Donald was 2.5 years old, and she revolved in her own world because of that. So he never had that loving, caring, parental nurturing that children should have, especially at a very tender age, in order to perhaps, you know, make him less narcissistic than he is. Because what it seems also that Fred was trying to instill in him is this ruthlessness, this go for it, and this is what he also learned in the academy when he was sent at 13 years old. Again, a very tender age, just about puberty for boys and girls, of course, but for boys, very, very tender age. Military, very tough academy, and he came out a man, the man that Fred wanted, liked, and then basically supported in Trump's endeavor. So I thought that was a very interesting insight into how we can understand sometimes his actions.
Yes, well, you've been in the business press, and you've probably known a lot of developers in your life. I grew up surrounded by developers. I think that personality pattern of that larger-than-life personality, very high risk-taking, very low levels of empathy, that's kind of developer, big risk, crazy personality that you see in a lot of places. And I mean, it makes sense with that sort of broken empathy, or that broken ability to form relationships. But I'd also say there's a lot of genetics there. So he's also 50% genetic, his dad, who was a hard charger. And my guess is his kids are probably going to be hard chargers. And so there's that piece as well that gets lost when you just talk about it in terms of a family narrative. Mm. But I would love to talk to Trump. I would love it. I talked to people who worked for him once, but I don't have the access, and it's very hard for me to judge people other than just, you know, you can read what people say, but I'd love to know. I just don't know.
But you see, this is very interesting that you say that, because the voters, they don't know him, Dr. Campbell. You know, they're at the same position that we are. All we grab about him is what we get in different medias, fake media, fake news, perhaps not, be it online. And however, all we have there is what we then cast our ballot with. you see.
Yes. I mean, but read the stories about LBJ, or Lyndon Johnson, who is sort of rated as the most narcissistic president we've had. And this is before Trump, but I don't know who. They're both pretty high up. You know, Nixon was high, but more vulnerable. So we've had really horrible human beings as presidents that people, if you go read the biography of Johnson, it's shocking. But the stuff was routinely covered up back then. I mean, we just had Clinton with 2 girls at Pedophile Island, and no one cares. So it's not like politicians were a bunch of good people before Trump came along. I just look at them as kind of,
Yeah.
I don't expect a lot from our political class. I usually just assume they're kind of bad people who are evil, and I like to be pleasantly surprised.
Okay.
It's just the system. I mean, it's a horrible system for selecting people because it's half celebrity and half ruthless power.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a good way to select good people.
Yeah, and the electoral system in the States actually made it only possible that Trump actually won the election. Yeah, by votes, it was Hillary Clinton, I think, the number of votes that did win the election. But that's a different issue. So if you say...
Yeah, that's above my pay grade.
I don't know. My torpedo, I don't want to know. I sit here in Switzerland, La La Land, as I call it, because everything seems to work here, because it's a tiny country, but a lovely one. Last one. Trump, what can we expect from him should he win the next election? What can we expect of him, Dr. Campbell? These are unfair questions, perhaps, but from a psychological level. I don't want you to make any kind of political statement.
Yeah, no, I don't do politics. In my role, I will say, in terms of observing Trump's psychology and what people said before and after, what Trump does is he picks fights with people and he will set it up so he's fighting against you and you hate America and he supports America. So whatever it is, he will put you in a situation where he's defending America and fighting against you. And he does that to everyone. And I assume he will continue doing that. His behavior pattern is pretty consistent as president. You can kind of see what he does, see how he works things. It's not like he's erratic. He just kind of does his shtick. And a lot of people don't like it, so I don't think they see it. But to me, it's not too secret. He wants to be in charge. He's for America. You hate America. But I like America. No, you don't. You hate America. And then he makes sure. I assume he'll do the same thing.
Okay, same old. And I think what you mentioned there before, there's a term called gaslighting.
Yeah, gaslighting is a term that people use this a lot, and there's really no research on it. There's a little bit of philosophy, and we've tried, but it's the idea, it comes from an old movie, but it's the idea somebody makes you think you're crazy. So you're like, you're a bad leader. No, you're mistaken. I'm a good leader. Are you sure you're okay, Keith? Have you taken your meds? Are you sure? I've done a great job. There must be something wrong. Look, all these other people say I'm great. There must be something wrong with you. When you go, oh my God, I'm crazy. I'm the crazy one. He must be a great leader. So, I mean, that gaslighting is something people talk about. Again, I wish there were good research on this.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one because it seems, and it has been also mentioned by journalists, where he kind of stokes up a fire, goes like, fire, look, and then is the big hero to extinct it. And this is kind of like the sum up of gaslighting, how it's been portrayed with regards to Trump and politics as of late. And let me share a screen with you of how Trump addressed especially the governors and how they should react, because what I thought was very interesting, he calls these demonstrations and the escalation of them terrorism. And then the next sentence he says, well, if you don't calm down, I'm going to send in the military, which of course is something quite interesting to see, especially in a democracy. So this is his quote. Earlier Monday, Trump pushed governors to dominate, and that's a quote, protesters during a conference call, or they are going to run over you and you're going to look like a bunch of jerks, adding most of you are weak. Please comment on that, Bill.
It's an incredible statement. And he really, later that day after that yesterday's call with the governors, went public and pretty much conveyed the same sentiments. And whether or not Trump is an alpha male who's always trying to position himself as the stronger person in the room, and this notion of domination is so incendiary and inflammatory. It is in line with other remarks that he's made, such as when the looting starts, the shooting starts, which harkens back to racial statements by police chiefs in the 70s and 80s. And, you know, I think what this is, and it's very striking, and ironic is probably too weak a word, because just 6 weeks ago, when governors were resisting opening their economies out of concern for the safety of the people they represent, and there were right-wing protesters, some of which brandished arms as they marched on state capitals in Michigan and elsewhere, Donald Trump did not talk about bringing in the National Guard. He did not talk about using the US military. He tweeted, "Liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia to secure, they're going to take away your Second Amendment rights." This was fomenting actual demonstration against state governors, state governments, and calling for them to open up their economies. But with these protesters who are not bearing arms, who are saying, we have a history of structural racism in this country, and it is time to stop. It is time for accountability. White policemen, there are so many who are great ones. My brother was an LAPD detective, now retired. There simply hasn't been the structural accountability. And what needs to happen is not domination. There needs to be discussion, reform. Yep. There needs to be training for de-escalation in situations like that, involving some of the, Goerge Ffloyd perhaps even, but he was taken out of his car for apparently writing a forged check. He's not a dangerous man. But de-escalation in times when there are tense potential arrests, there needs to be transparency. There needs to be independent investigations of police wrongdoing. There needs to be database accumulation so that we have a tracking of practices. Interesting on the word tracking, and interesting drawing, to continue from what he said in that call. He said, you've got to arrest people. You've got to track people. You've got to put them in jail for 10 years, and this will go away. I was struck by the notion of tracking because we are in the midst of a pandemic where we have not tested, we have not traced, and we are not going to get rid of this until we take the responsible practices to combat this disease so it doesn't come back again.
Yeah.
Bill Barr at the time described that unrest as opportunistic gang violence and not, quote, the product of some festering injustice. So we're seeing really a replay of an event nearly 30 years ago where Barr has been talking up and chalking up the protests to far left fringe groups that are organized, that are bent on terrorism and violence. That is simply not squaring with the video footage that you see in cities across the country. Yes, there are peaceful protesters who are staying after curfews. There are curfews all over this country, which we have not seen since the 1960s. Yeah, and they are making a quiet statement by and large, but it's when the windows get smashed, it's when the buildings get burned that there's some credence to what Barr is saying, and Trump absolutely plans to capitalize on that, pitching himself now as the law and order candidate. He was if you recall the February State of the Union address with the economy soaring, the stock market at record highs, jobs for everybody, including boasts about African Americans employed in numbers like the world has never seen before in this country, and so on and so forth. That economy is no longer. And what he has to run on has therefore changed. And he is taking a page out of the playbooks of Richard Nixon and others to do what he does best anyway, which is to divide. And now it's to say, we're going to make it safe for you. And we're going to, if we have to, bend the rules on law enforcement, bend the rules in military action. It's up to the governors, once again, to show the leadership. Tim Walz in Minnesota, a former National Guardsman himself, has called on the National Guard to assist his police, but he has also said they're going home soon. Okay? So we needed to be responsible, and we needed to be, it has been heartrending and inspiring to see the police chief of Minneapolis, the police chief of Flint, Michigan, the police chief in Houston. They are, in some cases, hugging.
Yeah, they want to listen.
They're hugging, they're listening, they're marching in some cases, they're putting down, they're kneeling, they're taking off their hats, they're showing many signs. That is probably, these are great symbols, and it's probably not enough for the African Americans and the minorities who have seen so much for so long. But it is an effort to move in the right direction.
Yeah, it could even be a start if the leadership would take a lead from that, from the grassroots, symbolism that you were just mentioning. So, Bill, just map it out for us. What do you think is going to happen over the next few days? How is this situation going to be resolved?
I think it is going to be hard to put the genie back in the proverbial bottle here anytime soon. These protesters are legitimately angry. There needs to be, until there is a sense that the message is being heard, I think they will continue. What will be tragic is if force is used and we see casualties. There has been some good developments. I mean, the fact that the officers were fired so suddenly in the Goerge Ffloyd case in Atlanta, 2 officers were also suspended or fired for use of excessive force. The police chief in Louisville, Kentucky, was fired as a result of a death that happened. So something is changing that's different here. But I expect that these protests will go on for some time until there is we're looking for national leadership, and there really needs to be an acknowledgement. And you even have the Atlanta mayor, Keisha Bottoms, who said, if Trump can't say anything positive, if he can't make the right message, then it's better that he doesn't comment at all. That is probably true for a lot of people, but it is so sad because a divided nation needs to heal to be able to progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And the healing needs to come from the top. So then a quick comment of what Joe Biden has been displaying so far, including his address in the church, I think last night, compared to what Trump is doing, i.e. the photo opportunity in front of the church, in front of the White House.
Well, Biden, some months ago, has also had to change his messaging, just as Trump has moved from, touting the economic successes under his administration, which also continued the many from the Obama administration, to a law and order position that we're seeing developing right now. Joe Biden largely was saying, we're going to restore things. We're going back to where things worked in government, that there was a level of competence, that you can have trust and accountability in government at the federal level across all agencies, that more of a restoration and common decency theme. Now I think you hear the messaging of we're battling for the soul of the nation. And whether nations have souls, they have ideas about what they want to be. And I think we're, going to be deciding, are we secure and safe? And are we living up to our ideals? Are we dystopic? Are we, forever going to be mired in riots and unrest and all of this? I think, as an organization, as a nonpartisan organization, we don't take sides on campaigns or policies. But what we are wondering goes back to your question earlier about the future of democracy. We all like to think of ourselves as patriots and believers in institutions and systems that whoever you are, you can bring your grievance, it will be heard, it will be adjudicated, you will have an opportunity to rise in this society. That is really, I think, if we consider what will be at stake in November, it will be health, it will be jobs, it will be, is this a democratic society where opportunities are equal and justice rules?
So what are the chances, looking at Trump's birth chart and his chart in general, what are the chances that the leader that he revealed himself to be can really lead into this new epoch with air? Or would be the combination Biden and Harris the right combination? What do the charts say there?
He's not the one. Definitely not. But he's the one who will evoke the change. Because he's not the one who can lead the society into this new epoch. Definitely not, because he's so rooted in the old kingdom. But as I said, it's like when you give birth to a child, the birth of a new epoch, it's bloody, it's painful, it's a tension, it's a fight for life, it's about all or nothing at all, Mm-hmm. So we are witnessing the birth of a new epoch, and we are right in the middle of it. So these political leaders, they are part of the tension and the blood and the intensity that is required in order to take a decision for the new rather than staying in the old. I would have looked at his birth chart when he was born. I would have seen this complete absence of empathy, because there is a deep fear to feel. He has a very, very deep fear to feel. But since he's a Gemini, he can act playfully on that in a way that people don't, most people do realize, but many people might not realize that he doesn't want to feel, because he might be like playful or have a good argument or be, have a certain kind of rhetoric that might be convincing in a particular situation. But his biggest fear is to have a deep feeling. And this is very interesting information, that somebody who has a deep fear of deep feelings has a very successful constellation on the other hand. Gemini in itself is not a bad sign, so to say. But when you have, and this is very interesting about the chart of this man, he has two completely different sections in his chart. Mm-hmm. He has a very successful, and it's hard to say that because I don't like to say that in terms of this person, but there is also something brilliant on one side, and there's something utterly dark on the other side. So it means he's trying to navigate these two sides, never let them show off together. And from that perspective, you can say he's a typical Gemini in the worst sense of the word, because he's a double-faced personality. But on two extremes. Two extremes.
Either totally good or totally bad.
But he can't be totally good, because he has a constellation. He has two constellations that are among the most successful constellations that somebody can have. It's called a trine between the Sun and Jupiter and a sextile between Jupiter and the Moon. Both are classical symbols or aspects of big success. And the other planet, this Uranus, makes him clever and tricky. So he knows how to navigate things in difficult times, because he will always jump away from one situation into the other one. That means when I change position, you can't detect me anymore. The thing is that when this planet Uranus is strong in a chart of a person, it means there can be something like a brilliance to that personality. You can have brilliant ideas, brilliant insights. But when this planet is too strong, it makes you detached from the ability to have human feelings.
So a lack of empathy.
Sorry?
A lack of empathy.
A total lack of empathy. And so he has, it is very interesting, he has this incredible successful aspect on his Sun-Moon opposition, on his full moon constellation. And at the same time, there is a total detachment. That means his success is built on a lack of empathy. And there is also something in his early childhood that you can see in the chart that must have been on some level so painful that he decided rather not to feel in order to keep going and to protect himself. This is a very, very strong signature in his chart.
Well, that's an interesting one, and I don't know whether, if I may interject, Alexander, if you read Mary Trump's analysis, she's a psychologist, about Donald Trump, and she was talking about the influences of his father and his mother being sick and very much wrapped up with herself, and his father being, a steamroller and also not being very, very present, and he was sent off to academy school very early on, and I think that lack of potential parental love, especially in the early years, might have caused exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but the funny thing when you look at the birth chart is the chart is there before the experience is happening.
Yeah, true. There you go.
So he was born with that constellation. And from that perspective, that's the fascinating thing about astrology. The question is, it's a question. Does your soul chooses a certain environment that attracts the experiences that you need according to your birth chart, to the information that you can find in the birth chart?